My client has had some bad press, and I need to push it down. Where do I start?
So that's a really good question. And it's a lot harder to do now than it was, let's say, 10, 12 years ago. Okay. If you get some bad press, and it depends on where that press is. Let's say, for example, you got some bad press coverage in the New York Times. You're not pushing the New York Times down the page by creating a new, piece of content. Now, in the past, I did have somebody we used to do some reputation management for. I'm not going to give the guy's name away, but he was a financial advisor. And he had a very unique name, right? Like I have a very generic name, Steve Scott. There's millions of Steve Scotts, but he had a very unique name. And he's a financial guy in Connecticut area, actually. And so if you went and typed in his name into Google, which people would do, there was a couple of different posts about him being involved in a Ponzi scheme. Now he wasn't, but there was like he recommended somebody or his company recommended somebody, and there was some kind of connection. But anyway, somebody in Florida, he was in Connecticut, I was in New York at the time, and somebody recommended to call me, and he had this blog written here in Florida by some company, and they had two different postings in the top 10 sitting on Google for this whole thing with his name Ponzi scheme, right? Now, long story short, eventually he did wind up through legal channels getting them to remove everything because it wasn't true. But in the meantime, it's sitting there. What do you do? So what we did for him is we made a bunch of other pieces of content, right? We created a WordPress page for him that was like, myname.wordpress.com. We created a Twitter account for him with his name on it. We created a about.me page. We created I think it was called Yatada or something like that page. So we basically went on the web, found a lot of these places where you can create a page different blogging platforms, and other local stuff. And we started creating content based on his name. We even got hisname.com and started putting up his bio and information about him and so on. We put out some press releases, right, about news that was going on. So in fact, shortly after I met him, his company was going through a rebranding. And so we put a press release out about them rebranding and talking about the history of the company, why they're rebranding. And it got picked up by Reuters, it got picked up by Yahoo Finance. And because those sites are really well known and have a lot of authority, a lot of power, we started to see some of this stuff kind of move down. But here's the deal, okay? First off, while we got rid of the one high at the top, we were never able to get the other one bumped down all the way. So there's no guarantee that you're going to get rid of all this bad press. There's just no way. Also, Google's a lot harder these days. So it depends on what you're trying to get bumped down. If it's the client, this person's name, and they have a very generic name, it can be really hard. If it's a very unique name, it'll be easier because there won't be as many pages on the web with that name. But if the press they have is on some well-known sites, or even if they're not well-known, but here in Tampa, we have like a Tampa newspaper. So if you in Tampa and you get a write-up in Tampa about, some crappy thing that you've done, someone types your name in, that's probably going to show up pretty high. So the thing is that you can never guarantee that you're going to get all of them off the top 10, but that's kind of what we tried to do. We tried to create enough content and enough pages in enough places that focused on his name, focused on his brand, that that was constantly creating new content. Took a little while. The press releases helped the most quickly, but we did get picked up by other news sources. We spent a little extra money on the press release so that we could have video installed, have other things so that it would also push things down. But a lot of these things, a lot of these news and press sites, they do tend to be temporary, fleeting. They kind of fall off the page on their own as other things. They kind of age out, like news. News ages out. So the recommendation for most places is to try to build out other content. You can't just build a lot of content on one domain because it's only one spot. You have to actually create more information around the web in lots of places. Maybe do something on a LinkedIn profile that might be public. Find other public things like, WordPress.com. You can get, myname.wordpress.com. and then build it out. You can't just do one single page and have it work. It's got to do that. We were even interlinking these pages. We were linking his Twitter to his myname.com site and myname.com to About Me. We were linking About Me to his WordPress site and to his business's site, trying to kind of interlink everything. And then we also, in the press releases, link back to his new website as well. Trying to push things down. And it did do pretty good job. I mean, for one point, I think we had like 8 of the top 10 for his name were one of the properties that we either created or the existing website that he had that, we just made sure we had a page for him on it. He didn't have like, he had a company page, but they didn't have a page on the company page with him being, who he is and his background and bio and that kind of stuff. So we added that. We added his partner as well. So it looked like, we were kind of adding stuff. But that's the only really way that you're going to have any shot at it. But again, there's never a guarantee. And really, it only takes one thing for people to find that they can then do more digging with that same thing. I recently found out someone that goes, I don't want to give away too much yet. Somebody I know that I've known not well, but somebody I've known got arrested for drug possession thing. Okay, actually distribution. And when we found it and put his name, his fairly unique name, and sure enough, all of these different articles across local papers, across online stuff, have his name, what's going on, what happened, when he got arrested, why he got arrested, and so on. So it only takes one. You find one, you can find all the others. So again, really hard to do. There used to be companies out there, like I think it was like reputation.com. I don't even know if they're still around anymore. That would try to help with this, but because of the way Google works now, because of having authority, expertise, and trustworthiness, new websites don't have that anymore. Google doesn't just automatically give you a pass because you have your name in it, right? If you're brand spanking new and there's no links and no one's talked about you and you don't have a lot of content on the page, it's unlikely Google's going to rank you above some small newspaper that's been around for 20 years or 5 years even. So it's definitely hard to do, but that's the only real thing you can do to try to move those other pages down, is to build new pages of new content that can maybe get higher. And maybe is a big word there.
And, just tell your client to stop breaking the law.
Stop screwing around. Yeah. I had an interesting situation years ago. So I had this guy, I forget what he did. Let's just say he was a lawyer and he was a junior, right? Or he was the third, something like that. I forget. But it was like, Joe Schmo was his dad and he was Joe Schmo Jr., both in the same business. Well, Joe Schmo dad was a crook. Joe Schmo Jr. was a good guy, right? Doing the good thing. But he was getting screwed because anytime someone looked for Joe Schmo, they were seeing all the bad stuff from his dad. And it was nearly impossible to do anything for the guy. We tried a few little things to help out. And then we also had there was that one, what was that website for a while? Something Report. There was a website that used to come up all the time that for people that were, people were bitching about stuff. It was like a review site, the Something Report. Man, I can't remember what it was called. But I used to see people fighting back and forth. Like, somebody would say something about the owner would bitch and moan, they would fight back. Then people would, it was just like, you can't win those conversations. You can't win a fight over, he said, she said kind of things. It never works. So, I forget what name. I can't remember what that name is. It's fleeting. I can't think of it. Anyway.
But you brought it up, and I just think it's probably good to mention. This is the area of SEO that's referred to as reputation management.
Yes, reputation management is what you call it.
So for the person asking the question, might also want to do a little research into reputation management. And
yes, that is definitely the way to go.
See how things are going these days.
Different world now, man. So much more difficult than it was back then. I mean, back then, my goodness, 10, 12 years ago, it was so easy to push people down. It really was. Can't get all of them, but you can get 8 out of 10, be your property. I mean, just not the same anymore.